Hello and welcome to Art School Live. My name is 𝗪𝗲𝗍 and I am subbing for 𝗟𝗶𝗁𝗁 while he's off on one of his art adventures. And today we have a special guest, Richard Lindenberg. So Richard, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And what are you going to teach us today, Richard?
We're going to deal with reflections in water. And of course, there's obviously a lot of different kinds of water, and it's very subjective how one paints water. But I'm going to do my techniques and things that I would use and how I would use them.
I'm so excited to learn from you, and especially about such a tricky subject like reflections on water. So let's get this show started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhodes.
Hello and welcome, everybody. You may have noticed that I am not Eric Rhodes. My name is 𝗪𝗲𝗍. I run an organization called the School of Atelier Arts, and Eric has invited me to take his place this week while he is away on one of his wonderful art adventures, the Winter Art Escape in Florida. Today, our guest is Richard Lindenberg, and Richard's going to be teaching us all about reflected water and what his method is for painting reflected water. So Richard, I'm so excited to learn with you today, and I'm ready to get started.
Okay, well, I'll take it over. So, as I was saying, very subjective how one paints water, and there's obviously many different kinds of water. There's rivers, ponds, streams, things like that, and then there's wind, there's still water. I'm going to be doing a painting in a local scene nearby today that is basically still water, and there's a lot of ways that I would convey this, so I'm going to show you some tips and things. Before I start, what I want to do is give you some basic indications of how I do this. So dark shapes on land, I'm always going to paint the land shapes first when I'm doing water because they're more sharply in focus. The water itself is always a little bit lighter, most cases anyway, a little bit lighter than the dark shapes up in the mass. And it's going to be definitely more out of focus than the sharper areas that are on the landmass. So I filled in a lot of this already because there's not a lot of time in the demo. So I'll just get right into it. When I start painting, I'll basically just quickly block in. So this color is a little bit lighter than that color. I'm using horizontal strokes and vertical strokes. When I start painting the reflections, I'm going to be using a lot more vertical strokes. So I'm basically just filling in blocks of color. And then I'll move to the next level, a little more blued down. Then I'll go down to the lightest level, which is again a little more blued down. And I'm mirroring the edges of these trees down here. And I've left the lighter spaces a little bit blank, just so I can paint those in for you as well right now. And all of it's going to be a little bit out of focus. It's not going to be as sharp as the top. So when I paint a lighter color, I'll go a little bit darker down below. When I paint a darker color, I'll go a little bit lighter down below. So, I'm mirroring, but I'm not doing it in any kind of sharp focus.
Is it fair to say that you're compressing the value range in both directions?
That's my style. I typically do compress value ranges. And as I mix here. So every time there's a light spot above, I'm going down below and I'm sort of mimicking, but I'm not doing it in sharp focus. And I keep stepping back and looking at it to see if, in fact, that mirror works.
And can you tell us a little bit about, are you working from a photograph? Are you working from a study?
I'm working from a photograph on my iPad over here, but you can't see it.
Okay, well, we do see
that
image.
is the photo, yeah.
Okay, great. So we do see an image on the corner of our screen here. And so it seems to me that you are enhancing this image, right? You're not painting it directly as you see it.
The actual photo?
Yeah, like when I'm seeing
I'm not painting, I'm just using my interpretation. I am basically slightly colorblind with blues and greens.
Oh,
So I'm never going to have an exact interpretation. And if I was painting it on site, of course, it's totally wide open how to interpret it because there's so many variables.
oh, that's
So, yeah.
Do you have any advice for artists that are also like slightly red-green colorblind? I get this question a lot in my online school, like as someone who's a slightly.
Well, I'll tell what I normally say. It's sort of like somebody who is, let's take Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder he's blind, but he hears exceptionally well.
Sure.
So it's sort of like that. I know where the blue pile is. I know where the green pile is. I know that it's blue. I know that it's green. It's the middle values for me. The middle values of the blues and the greens compress into grays, and it's hard to distinguish the degree of saturation in those colors. So it's just value more than anything, more than color.
So would you say that you are especially sensitive to value because of this unique situation you're in?
Yeah, definitely values for sure. But I tend, like you said, I tend to compress values anyway. I work a little more on the grayer side of things.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but that's just what I do. All right. So I'll give a few more basic rules that I adhere to. And again, it's not for every scene. This is going to be a still water scene. And right in the last 5 minutes of it, I'm going to use palette knife to really pop, the details that are in these little water reflections that catch light. I'll go after in the end. But for right now, I'm still working on big shapes. So they're mirroring the big shapes. And you got to stand back to really see how that's working. The eye knows, the viewer that's looking at it knows that it is mirroring that, even if you don't have it correctly, faithful to the scene. So I just go at it very quickly, and now I'm going to move down. When I get down to the water that's reflecting the sky is usually, it's not always this case. In fact, none of this is always the case, but the sky usually will be lighter in the sky and darker as it goes down, and it starts to grade down to even darker down here. So, I'll start, you got to look at it and just see how it works value-wise. Like you were saying, it's all about the values. I know this is a bluish gray, but I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to the color itself. I'm only paying attention to how I treat it as it goes down. It gets a little bit darker. And if you could keep me informed of the time, Mandy.
Oh, absolutely. So we're 10 minutes in, so we have about 40 minutes left.
Oh, 40 minutes?
Yep.
Oh, cool. All right, then I can slow down a little bit.
Yes. We are not trying to give you a panic attack here.
Yeah, for sure. When you do mirror the above, tendency is to go a little sharp with the colors that are up here reflecting down here, but I tend to definitely want to fuzz those down. So I'll give you an example. So this color here, if I bring it down, whoops, got to get the right color. As I bring it down, I'll go a little bit softer with it, but yet I want to still reflect that that's the top of the tree line. And again, the viewer's mind is going to know what's going on here.
Mhm.
You know, like you got this line coming, so it's going to go. And a few horizontal strokes will pull it into soft. Now, if you want, you can always go back and pull it down again, going vertical or horizontal.
I always love how seeing different artists creating their edge work and you know how sharp or softly they bring their colors together. But I've never seen anybody work quite like this with the vertical and the horizontal.
Yeah, it's, well, you know, you're really trying to just convey that shape that you're reflecting. And this one doesn't need a whole lot of the color going on up there that's working on the top. It doesn't need a lot of it. It just needs a little bit.
Would you say it's typical for you to paint the landmass first and then the water last, or did you do that?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Absolutely, because that's what you're reflecting down below. So
Mhm.
you got to be able to see what you got up here in order to bring it down below.
Sure.
Okay, so for this point, I'm fine with that. You know, moving down to this mass, which is reflecting this.
Mhm.
There's some darks and lights, but it's really obscure. So I'm just playing,
Mhm.
you know, making again the value work. And if I stand back and look at it, I can see the separation. I know that this is reflecting that shape and this is reflecting that shape, and
Sure.
so on as it goes. Same now when I go down to the bottom of the painting, as it comes closer to you, it's more saturated and it's more intense. So my water line, and that's another example that I wanted to say. Most people whenever I teach a class or something like that, a lot of people don't realize that if it's dark here, it has to be grounded by having a similar dark here. Otherwise, there's not a reasonable transition. It just looks like it's floating in
Ah,
space. It looks like it's floating in space. So I tend to accentuate that when I talk to people. It's only a slight, this is a good example. It's
mhm.
separating, but there's too much of a separation. So it doesn't grade into the shadow. So
Sure.
I tend to ground it. Same with trees. I do the same thing with trees. I tend to ground it so it lightens up as it goes down from there.
So would you say that's the biggest mistake students make when painting water is not letting the reflections be dark enough in the transition?
It's definitely one of the strong mistakes that people make.
Do you have
Um,
examples of other mistakes that that's common for students to make when they're learning to paint water?
Say it again. I'm sorry, I
Do
missed that.
you have examples of other common student mistakes when they're painting water, things that you see students do consistently?
Yeah, people paint it too sharp, where they see the transitions on the lightness at the top,
Mhm.
and they worry too much about getting detail into the reflected area of the
Ah,
painting. But again, if you treat it just like shapes, like blocks, you know how when you're blocking in a painting, it's the same thing. You're just treating this as shapes. You're not thinking about reeds and you're not thinking about the trees. You're creating shapes that reflect it. That's all.
mhm,
And that's very common for what I see.
mhm.
All right, so that's a good start of how I would treat the mass. Now I'll go into a little more detail on edge work. So whenever you have a light area, it's going to be a little darker in the water. More, and I say this tongue in cheek, it's not always that way, but it's typically that way.
Mhm. Would you say that the color is less intense also in the water?
Yes, less saturated for sure. So I'm standing back as I paint this, and I'm just looking to see that, you know, that the reflection really does. So like on this one, it's just flat, but I see it climbing the mountain.
Mm. And just to clarify for our viewers, you're using oil painting today, correct?
Yeah, these are oils.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so it's mirroring, but it's a little darker than that. But
Mm-hmm.
if you look at it from a distance, you clearly see the reflection without being too. The viewer is not too. What would I say? The viewer is not too stuck on these mirrored shapes,
Mm-hmm.
but they're obviously there. So I keep looking at it. I keep evaluating how the viewer is really looking at this. I'll take my fingers. I might clarify something. Okay, this one over here is not too clear. I'm just pulling down, creating a shape without too much edge work. All right, now I'm looking at the bank. I'm looking at my photograph, and I'm checking, do I have enough transition between the actual edge of the water?
Mm. How do you determine how sharp or soft your transition is between the landmass and the water?
It's always sharp above, and it's always softer below.
Well, that's a good answer.
So it's more about, I'm thinking what I just said about grounding the shape,
Mm-hmm.
like right here, it could be a little darker to ground it.
Would it be fair to say that the closer the reflection is to the object, the more closely it matches the color of the object?
Yes, of course. It's definitely more saturated right at the edge. And it's just helping to separate the shapes.
So David has a good question in the chat. David's asking, how do you get the size of the reflection between the bank and the tree?
It's just a matter of feel. So it's proportions. It doesn't have to match this exactly. It can go. I could bring this all the way down to here. In fact, in the photograph, it does bring it down much further.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as long as the viewer is able to look at it and distinguish that that's a tree. So
Mm-hmm.
just because he asked, I'll bring it a little lower. And I'm using vertical strokes to convey this.
Okay.
And more horizontal at this stage, but more vertical as I go down.
Mm-hmm. Are the vertical strokes intended to imply the kind of texture of the water? Is that why you?
No, it softens, and it's just the mechanics of how water reflects. I think it's not with intention that I'm trying to paint it horizontal or vertical.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to paint crosswise. I'm just doing a little more horizontal up at the top of the painting and a little more vertical as I go down to reflect. And I'm satisfied with the way that all looks. Now I'm going to move down to the more saturated areas. The color also is another. Typically, it gets lighter. Like the darker areas get lighter, but they also they can vary in color. This one is the same color, just a different value. But I can add a little more of that goldish color into there. Just my interpretation, you know.
So are you
I know. Go ahead.
are you thinning your paint with anything, or are you using straight pigment?
I do thin it with terp,
Mm-hmm.
but only if it needs it.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of terps do you use?
Gamsol.
Gamsol.
And sometimes I use a medium. If I'm doing a more detailed studio painting of sorts, I might use a stand oil kind of just an oil to put into the media as a medium to give it a little more fluid feel to it, because it's not diluting the way that the Gamsol will go into saturation.
Sure. Just a heads up, we have about 30 minutes to work, just so you know how to pace.
No sweat. Doing good.
Excellent.
I think it helped to pre-do some of this.
For sure, especially when you're trying to focus on teaching one specific thing to, set yourself up to be able to focus for that hour on that.
Okay, so I'm doing these reeds, and tendency is for people to start putting in little dibs and dabs. At this stage, I'm treating it again just as a shape. And I could add more green to this, but as long as it reads, reads.
I see what you did there.
So it does need a little bit more green.
There's a question in the chat about do you use a different technique when you're painting rough water versus more smooth water, or is it the same?
Oh yeah, totally different.
Okay.
Yeah, you're using a little more broken color when you're using like wind rippled water and things like that. It's totally different. Mm-hmm. It has its own set of rules, but it can't convey it all to you today. So
maybe the next time we get to see you.
I'm just working with still water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to go down, add a little bit more color into the base of those reeds really quickly. And the reflection, so like, let's say the reed is going off, like that. So the reflection will go in the same kind of direction if it's still water. Mm-hmm. If it's not still water, a lot of things can happen. But...
Can you tell us about your brush? Is it synthetic?
This is a synthetic, yeah. Okay. I use bristles typically when I'm blocking in a painting, just to give it a little more texture. Mm-hmm. But the synthetics tend to hold their shape in a different manner. You can get a little sharper edges and things like that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you can really play with these colors and really be very painterly with them. I'm not paying attention to that, but you can put little air holes implied just by adding a little stroke here and there. Oops. But the viewer will get it,
I love this faith that you put in the viewer. I think sometimes as painters, we're afraid if we don't describe every little thing that a viewer won't get it. And I really love your approach, your philosophical approach to the viewer.
Yeah, well, they're an important part of this process.
As it turns out.
And you know how you put air holes in trees? Well, you can do the same thing with reeds. Hmm. Okay, so let's see what I can say now. So if you look at the original photograph over here, you'll see there's a whole lot of reflections and sharp little dots and dabs going on in there. And that's so important, to the finished part of the painting. And when I go to look at this, when I stand back and look at it, before I attack that, I'm really looking at now some little extra edge work. And this can be sharp.
There's a question in the chat about your light areas. Is that pure canvas or was that painted white on the bottom left there?
Now it's painted in a blue-gray. Okay. It was white when I started. I do tone canvases, but I didn't tone this one.
Okay.
Mostly because I want that white. When I do start doing these slices, I do want some white in there. Mm-hmm.
So is it common for you to have some raw canvas like poking through in your paintings?
Some, not a ton. I'm not I don't really concentrate on that. As I apply paint, I don't worry about whether it's covering fully or not. It's just the overall look of how I want it, how I like or not like the actual the way it feels. So this canvas, I don't know if you can tell when you're looking at it, there's a lot of brush strokes from the vertical bristles, even though it's synthetic. There's a lot of bristle marks in there, which add to me, it adds to the life of the painting.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what your canvas surface is and how you prepared it?
I typically work on linen. I do it in a number of ways. One way is to take old panels, old linen that I have with a really nasty painting. I'll just cover it with Gamblin oil ground, not so that it's opaque white, but white enough that I can then paint over it. I also glue my own. I'll buy a roll of linen sometimes and glue it to gator foam if I'm traveling. If I'm in the studio, I don't care about gator foam, but if I'm traveling, gator foam really makes things lighter and easier.
Sure.
But I tend to typically work on linen these days. I love the texture of linen. I love the drag. So I'm just putting a couple of highlights. I'm not being faithful to the actual photograph. I'm just looking at it to add a little definition, especially where it's got a lighter feel above, like right there. Okay, so I'm feeling that the top part of the painting is quite, I'm happy with it.
Woohoo! A great artist victory right there.
Oh, no, I see things. You're never really done, right? You're looking at it. We say, okay, I'm done. No, I'm not done.
I always find it very dangerous to leave my paintings in sight of other activities, like near the laundry room or, just any other activity I'm doing, because then I just want to get back into it, even after I've said it's done.
Well, I'll tell you my story. When I'm painting outside, I can go, 2 hours easy, just hardly breathing, just painting, right? Nonstop. When I'm in the studio, I'll go 10 minutes at the easel. I'll sit down at the computer for 10, 20, 30 minutes. I'll go 10 more minutes. I'll go to the kitchen, get my coffee, have breakfast. I can't stand at the easel for more than 10, 15 minutes during the when I'm in the studio. But outside, no sweat.
Well, it's a sign that you're meant to be a plein air painter then, I think.
Well, definitely it's my passion. That's how I got involved. Okay, I'm now going to go shift gears. I'm going to mix a little paint, and I'm going to start going at these stronger palette knife reflections and the dib-dab reflections with the palette knife that will really pop this painting. So I'm doing it at this stage. I can always go back and refine color, refine shape, refine the things that I've done already. So, because I'm never done, I keep looking at it. And like right now, I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, this could use a little bit more definition. Well, I could do it later. I could do it now. But I just feel like I want to go at the palette knife reflections, because I think that's really, really fun and really important for people.
Well, so Patty in the chat agrees with you. She says, woohoo, palette knife.
Yeah. So in your picture, I don't know if you can see the colors, but there's a mixture of a little bit of that creamy color, a little bit of white, and then it doesn't really matter because it's all about the value. So I'm going to just mix a color, and we'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, I'll just refine it till it does work.
I like that. I'm always trying to convince my students that they don't need to panic. If you put something down and it's not the right thing, you just keep working on it until it is the right thing.
Yeah. So in this painting, it's really horizontal orientation. So if I go too far up, it doesn't look right. If I point down, it doesn't look right.
You're so brave.
And it gets, as it goes out, okay, so it doesn't take any time, hardly. You let the palette knife just skip along.
It's amazing how so little can create so much visually.
It also adds enough texture to the overall painting that it looks painterly.
Loretta is also excited about the palette knife. She says that the palette knives get a workout when I use oils.
I'll leave that shape for now, and I'm going to go to some of the little shapes that are going on out here. So I'm just pressing if it's too much. So I can just take that. If I feel like I put too much, I can just bring it back. And you can cut these by doing a horizontal stroke in it. So I'll keep going. As it goes further out here, it can be a little bit more sparse.
Is that always true? Is it more obvious towards the shoreline and less obvious the further away from the shoreline, or is that just this particular view?
It's just the way the water is hitting the sunlight, the sky above, and you can do as little or as much as you want, as long as you keep standing back and looking at it. You can go down here. Here's another tip, that typically at the edge of the landmass, you know, like there's the bottom of the reeds here, typically there are glints of light that hit it. And it helps to further separate the land from the shadow. Same thing up here.
Betsy is also excited about the knife work and is saying it's like icing on the cake.
Yeah, it's exactly.
And also Ellen is saying that it's really nice to see how a pro fixes something, you know, that you didn't want necessarily. Like when you were adjusting other highlight.
Sure. So another good example. So right there, you see how it's tilting up a little bit. So I want to just straighten that out. Okay, how much more do I want to do? Oh, right here, this nice bit.
And just a heads up, we have about 15 minutes.
Okay. So obviously I missed up there. I can take a knife and just come back. I'll scrape it. Just do a horizontal stroke on it and take it away.
So there's a someone saying in the chat that a palette knife on the right side brings the eye of the viewer more towards the center. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So these reeds are bringing you in. This is bringing you in, and that's bringing you in. Not that it's going to this area alone. It's just helping you move. It's almost like a circle shape that's going on here.
So if you had to describe the overall theme of your composition, would you describe it as a circle shape?
Yeah, I guess I would.
I love learning how artists think of their compositions. I find that everybody has these, ideas in their head of what they're thinking, with the big overriding unifying idea of their compositions.
Yeah, I don't typically think about it a lot. Do you?
Well, I'm starting to think
it's all unconscious. It's all unconscious,
Yeah. It's
so
like all of your other paintings and experience combined together to lead you to this creation.
Yeah, exactly. So I sort of obliterated this this edge here. So I got to go back in.
There's a question in the chat. So Ellen's saying that she didn't know about the little lights below the masses in the water. Is that just in the foreground area, or would that be in the background as well? Those highlights.
You mean?
Yeah. So you did it on the shoreline back there. Yeah. Okay.
I don't quite understand the question.
You answered the question.
Okay.
You put the highlights in the foreground, but also you have highlights in the background as well, where the land mass is meeting the water.
I'm re-emphasizing some of the dark separations that I might have obliterated a little bit. And again, I don't want to pay too close attention to detail. So it's that edge right there seems to be obliterated. And then this one seems to be obliterated, which does happen because you're putting in lightness on top.
So there's a request, pretty please, before you finish, could you show us your palette or list your colors so that we know what you're working with?
Yeah, well, I pre-mixed. I'll just tell you what I did. Basically, my palette is cad light yellow. I'll use an ochre for just warming things or cooling things down. I use an ultramarine blue. I use a green, whether it be an olive green or a sap. This particular case, I'm using olive green. But I mix my own colors because I'm colorblind. Working from a tube isn't always the best for me. So I tend to always mix my own colors. It's a pretty standard palette. I don't trust the tube colors. I just play with my own colors.
Do you have any red on your palette?
Yes, of course, I have red, but I haven't used, I'm going to use the red if I need it to dull down the greens. But I don't typically, in this particular case, I wouldn't really use red a lot. Okay, so I've separated a little bit more of these masses and mirrored them down below. And I just randomly go horizontal and vertical. I'm not really paying attention to a whole lot. Okay, so now I can go down. Let's continue with the knife a little bit down here.
So we have a question, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have difficulty pronouncing this name, Mayona, I hope. Sorry, Mayona, if I'm saying your name wrong. Is saying that it's a beautiful scene, but when I do mine, they seem rather boring. How do you make yours interesting? How do you have a center of interest?
It's a simple scene. It's one that is more subtle, but it's clearly. So she's saying it seems boring to her. Is that what she's saying?
No, she's not saying that yours seems boring. She's saying when she paints hers, they seem boring to her. Like,
oh, I see.
Struggling with her composition. So do you have any advice?
Yeah. Paint.
Excellent advice.
It's not easy to basically be able to communicate what you want especially if you don't know what you want. I find that most people who are in the early stages of learning are not clear when they start their painting of what they want to say, or I should say how they want to paint it. So for instance, I knew I wanted to paint reflections here, and I was clear what I wanted in my head before I even painted. I really was, oh, I see that's covering it. So I really was clear in my head what I wanted. Now I can't always achieve it, but if you're confused in the beginning, you're going to be confused in the middle and certainly at the end.
That's a great quote and certainly true. So to summarize what you just said, have a big idea in your head before you even start painting about what you're trying to achieve.
Well, not quite a big idea, but just
an idea,
how you want it to make it happen, how you want it to paint. Even if you don't do it while you're painting it, you don't want to be confused with what your end result is. So try and picture your end result before you even start your painting. And it's going to change throughout the painting, but at least you had a plan. It's a roadmap of how you wanted it to be.
So when you approach this painting, those reflections were your guiding star for this painting, is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. That's what this whole lesson is about. Yeah. Now I'm going to just break this shape up a little bit. And I can take it and move it out further. And I don't want to overdo it with these sparkles, but they do add a lot of interest to the painting.
Well, and I like that you called it sparkles, because that's what really happens with that texture you're laying down.
And you just move it around.
What are some mistakes that students make when they're putting their sparkles down? Like, what do they do wrong?
Too much or too little. And too many in the same area, or too much. I doubt when they make mistakes doing this, it's because they're probably not standing back and looking at it from a distance.
It seems like Paula in the chat can relate. She says, too many sparkles in all caps with lots of exclamation points.
In my painting? Okay.
No, that a common mistake.
I'm getting rid of it. Well, yeah. That's a good point. So I'm going to take it. And I'll get rid of some of those sparkles, just because.
I think she was implying that she puts too many sparkles in her paintings.
Oh, I get it. I wasn't taking it as a criticism. I was just saying.
Yeah, okay. Well, she wanted to make sure that I clarified. She said, no, my paintings.
Yeah, well.
And it looks like Lynn is saying, so true. I remember my first paintings years ago, way overworked. So when she was starting, she made that mistake. I got you, Paula, no problem.
Okay. So now I'm just standing back and I'm looking at it to see where I don't need sparkles there. You know, it's at this stage, there's not a whole lot of rules. It's just a matter of how the painting feels to you.
So there's a comment in the chat that this person's teacher, 𝗥𝗶𝗳𝗿, says that my teacher calls the sparkles adding the jewelry. Makes it easy to visualize, not adding too much.
Absolutely. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, adding the jewelry. Okay, now what I would do I'm going to go. So on these reeds, I would give these, let me get out a rigger. I would obviously spend a lot more time on the reeds in this painting. And if I was out in the field, this would go more or less what I'm doing now. If I was in the studio painting this painting, which I'm not really doing, I'm more treating it like a plein air piece because I'm moving so fast. If I was out in the field, it would be about like this. If I was in the studio, I'd be giving it quite a bit more detail.
So there's
and motion.
There's a great question in the chat about what kind of frame would you visualize adding to this landscape, and is the frame a piece of jewelry too?
A nice frame works on every painting.
What a great statement.
Because I go to shows or galleries where they take 50%, it's I don't want to put a very expensive frame on it because they take half of the money.
Sure.
I typically work on attractive, inexpensive frames. That's
Excellent.
my rule.
I like that rule. All right, we have just about 2 minutes left today.
Okay. Let's see if I can come up with a. Let's see. Yeah, I've covered most of the areas. So I wanted to show the way the darks create the shape without a lot of strong edge work. It's very soft. But the transition from dark to medium dark to lighter dark to light needs to be very clear. And if I stand back and look at it, this works pretty well, especially for a demo.
Oh, there's one more really great question in the chat. Where would you sign it, and in what color?
I'll typically sign down either right there. And if it's a white underboard, I don't even.
Oh.
My signature on a small piece is basically an icon. That's my signature.
Could you bring the camera a little closer so we can see that?
All right. How do I get it there?
We're so close.
Wait, I'm going to take it off. I'll move it around the whole painting so you can see. So I'm not able to see this. So
okay. I'll guide you. So a little closer and a little lower. Oh, there we go. Excellent. And you just scratch that with the back side of your brush.
Yep.
A little lower.
And I'm going in and showing just some of the details of the painting.
Oh, this is wonderful to see it up close.
Very loosey-goosey, tighter up here.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. One last thing, Richard, in your name, to find you on social media, it's at Richard Lindenberg Fine Art. It says here Lindenberg, and I just want to make sure that I tell people the right thing. Yeah,
it's typed in incorrectly. It's Rich Lindenberg.
Oh, it's corrected. Thank you, Amadine. You're amazing.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, now it's correct. Thank you. I forget who said that in the chat, but thank you for looking out for our artists. We appreciate you. So once again, our guest today is Richard Lindenberg. You can find him at Rich Lindenberg Fine Art. It's been lovely to have you with us today. Thank you so much. And
thank you. My website is different also. My website is just myname.com, the full name.com.
richardlindenberg.com. So visit
Right.
his website at richardlindenberg.com and on Instagram at @richlindenbergfineart.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you so much for a beautiful painting demonstration today.
Mandy, thanks for hosting.
Much appreciation to you.
Okay.
So I have a gift for you. You can download the free video, 201 Essential Plein Air Painting Tips. Go to pleinairmagazine.com/ebook. And don't forget to sign up for Acrylic Live, March 26th through 28th, 2025, with Essential Techniques Day on March 25th. 4 days of premium instruction in acrylic painting with instructors like Charlie Easton, Kevin McPherson, Ann Blair Brown, Carla Bosch, Jed Dorsey, and many more. You can sign up at acryliclive.com/ASL. And of course, if you haven't signed up for the Plein Air Convention and Expo yet, it is time to do so. The prices go up on Valentine's Day. PACE is on May 19th through 25th, and you don't want to miss it. Sign up at pleinairconvention.com/ASL. And don't forget to subscribe and like this channel at Art School Live on YouTube and at Eric Rhodes on Instagram. Again, my name is Mandy Tice. I am substituting for Eric while he's away on his art adventures this week. And you can learn more about my online atelier, the School of Atelier Arts, at schoolofatelierarts.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at Mandy Fine Artist, or on my YouTube channel at School of Atelier Arts. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you all tomorrow.